Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and season 2020 is over, but it certainly didn't go quietly. Our story is not quite over yet, with Delistings, Brownlow Medal, All-Australian Trade Week and the draft yet to come. Joining me tonight is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, everybody. And GWS and Fremantle Football Club are definitely off the Christmas card list.
Absolutely, they are off the Christmas card list. I wasn't really expecting much from either team, but yes, now they, I've put their memberships back into the microwave and press the button. Also joining us tonight is a long-time caller to the show, Bidman. Good evening, Bidman. How are you?
Good evening, Demonlanders, George and Andy. Yes, now that question about whether there's an asterisk on this season for me is, I've been not quite sure of how I felt about that, but now I'm pretty sure there's definitely an asterisk on the premiership winner this year for sure.
Yeah, I was ready to sort of, make the case for it not being an asterisk, but now I'm firmly in the
asterisk camp. The other thought I had, Andy, was this week was a new way for Melbourne fans to suffer, because it began on the Monday night with hoping the Saints would get rolled by the Suns, and just kept on dripping. That water torture kept on dripping all week, didn't it? Friday night, the Giants couldn't get the job done. Saturday, we just got the job done in the end, and then Sunday, of course, we didn't. So, and then the Collingwood game was thrown in the mix too, wasn't it? So,
yeah, but that was that was over sort of a few days ago anyway.
yeah.
We love hearing from Demonlanders. So if you'd love to join our program tonight to discuss any of the topics that we talk about, you can give us a call on 03-9016-3666, or you can Skype us at Demonland31 while I turn on the computer that actually has that going. If you're listening to the show live, you can join us in our chat room. We can ask questions or post comments by heading over to demonland.com/podcast. If you're listening to the show at your leisure via SoundCloud on demonland.com or via an Apple or Android podcasting app, give us a subscribe. You'll receive updates when a new show drops. Please leave us a favourable review. It really does help other people find the show. We're also on Spotify and Stitcher, so you can get the show that way too. Go to demonland.com and find the links to your preferred method of listening. You can follow us on social media at Facebook, facebook.com/Demonland31, Twitter at Demonland, Instagram at Demonland31, or head over to YouTube, search for Demonland Podcast, and listen to some of the interviews that we've conducted with current and past players and coaches. If you love talking about the Ds 24/7 all year round, join up to demonland.com and you can chat with other Ds fans about the club and all the goings on. And this actually is the best time of the season for Demonland, when we're heading into trade, the draft, and then into pre-season training. So, head over to demonland.com and you can discuss about the Ds throughout the summer. Well, boys, this match really summed up pretty much the whole of 2020 in one game. We had some moments of brilliance. We had the lack of connection into the forward 50 at times. We had an inability to stem the flow of opposition goals. We almost blew a lead. I had a few small heart attacks towards the end. It really was the whole year wrapped up in one. And you mentioned sort of all the things that we were sort of wanting to happen, St Kilda winning, GWS beating St Kilda. I just wonder, had the Giants won, what would have happened in that game? We would have needed the percentage, and we were sort of set up to sort of thump the Bombers. And obviously that first part of the equation didn't pan out, so we weren't going for percentage. But would we, Big Man, I'll ask you, would we have blown a lead had we been needing it? I guess it's probably a moot point now, but it was disappointing.
It's interesting, actually, because I posted on Demonland that if you're a fan of the idea of a premiership point for incentivising high scoring with a premiership point, it would have been an interesting exercise in one of the positive outcomes of doing so. Because if the Giants had won by, say, 4 goals and we needed to win by a 4-5 goal margin, or let's say we had to win by 50, Goodwin would have had to engineer an attacking game plan, presumably, or alternatively, maybe just play how we normally would and then keep going. He would have had to sort of work out what the best way forward to get a 5, let's say a 5 goal, if that was the case, or 10 goal margin. I tend to think, though, that the pressure would have been more, and then it would have been difficult to play the game that they would have if that was the case, Andy, in terms of the needing a 10-goal win. If you need a 10-goal win, it's probably a bad starting point, isn't it? Because you're just always thinking about the pressure of scoring. Having said that, I've backed the D's over 39. That was my confidence that we'd give them a hiding after the fact that we didn't need the score. I wouldn't have been keen at all if Giants had, if Giants had won and we needed a margin. I wouldn't have been keen at all on thrashing them. But once that pressure was off and we just had to worry about the win, I was thinking we were a Monty to smash them, and we should have been. We really should have been close to 10 goals up at halftime, I reckon. We wasted so many opportunities and we let them back in. We'll probably talk about it, but they were mucking around at that 3-quarter time break.
We will talk about that.
Exactly as you said, it's like demons in a day, isn't it? Should have been 10 goals up, weren't because of our kicking accuracy. We're not fully switched on at 3-quarter time, and we almost get rolled. Or not, perhaps. Well, they got within 7 points, so close enough to my liking.
We've seen it all before, haven't we? That's why we keep coming back, I suspect. But I really love the comments from Titus O'Reilly this week, where he said if Melbourne had got into the finals, they could do some real damage. Not to the other teams, but to their fans. And I think that summed it up pretty well. We saw it all this week, and we're used to it. So I maybe missing out has given us a bit more resilience to come back for next year.
Yeah, I was thinking, what might have been. It looked like we'd be going over to Perth, and obviously you'd love to have that opportunity. You'd love to make the finals, but I fear we'd be crying in our drinks in 2 weeks' time with a hiding over there. But still, you'd love to make it. That's what we play footy for, to get into finals, to make finals, and we blew out our chance.
We blew our chance, and the question has to be raised, the controversy of George suggesting that we'll smash and should smash the Swans. It all started going horribly wrong after that point. It's a bit of a stretch.
I'm to blame.
Sorry.
I'm to blame.
Yeah.
Well, we should have. You're not to blame. We really should have. We should have smashed them, and we should have beaten the Dockers. Simple as that. The Bulldogs showed what it takes. Your season's on the line, and effectively we were we were waiting. We were wanting the Dockers to beat the Bulldogs, but just a few weeks before, as it turns out, the Bulldogs were hoping the Dockers would beat us, and they did.
Well, it was actually interesting, that game, watching the game in some senses, because both teams showed Melbourne how Freo showed in that first quarter how you had to beat the Dogs, how you had to play, which is as we talked about, the lead up to that game is to spread and to get across and defensively work hard and not allow the outlet kick, not allow them to switch and move the ball down the wing. As soon as that dropped off, that spread, the Dogs got a hold of them, and equally the Dogs showed the way to beat the Freo, which was basic execution. Their execution in that game was mostly above average, and when they had to, they kicked straight, they took their chances, stayed in the game, and then kicked away, and like a good professional footy team. So both of those teams showed the D's what needs to be done at this level.
And both of those, both St Kilda and the Dogs, when the game was on the line for them, they showed exactly what needed to be done, and ultimately they were the ones who got into the 8 and finals because they did what they needed to. when we had our chance, we blew it. So I think it was only proper and right in a sense that both of those sides got through and we didn't. We're exactly on the ladder where we should be, and given the performances that we had during the year.
Yeah, and I think that it's sort of there's a range of questions in there about why that is. For me, I keep coming back, or more and more coming back to the list, and I think I think our list falls away pretty badly after that. Your top 10, 11 players, and the Dogs last night had a couple of their good players out, and even Norton out at half time. But they had, I think they've by and large got a better list than us. St Kilda, I'm not quite convinced that's the case. But they've added some really good players this year, the Saints, and we're on a par though. What ended up with 4 more points than us, or did they end up on 40 points? So two more wins. So I think that we really got to get on with adding some talent to that list. But how you go about that's a challenge.
Absolutely, and when you talk about talk about rating our list, I think I sort of mentioned to you guys today that we'll probably do a show in a couple of weeks where we'll go through our list, do a bit of a player ratings and all that. So we'll get to that in the next couple of weeks. The usual suspects had good games this week: May, Gawn, Petrarca, Oliver, Langdon, Salem. Most weeks we tend to focus on the negative, and we don't give like the guys who were at the coalface the credit. So this is my thank you to those guys. Shout outs to Oliver and Petrarca for being number 1 and 2 this year for contested possessions. Oliver was number 1 at 227 contested possessions, and followed by Petrarca 216, and then Lockie Neal on 212. It's a pretty remarkable effort from those two. They're getting the ball out. What I want, I was going to say that when speaking about those guys in particular, I wanted to make mention that of our Demonland Player of the Year this year has been awarded to Christian Petrarca. He was number 1 on 175 votes, followed by Stephen May, 137, Oliver in third on 133. Max leapfrogged Jack Viney this week on 124. Jack Viney 5th on 111, and Ed Langdon brings out the top 6 on 87. So just wanted to sort of thank those guys, because they're sort of week in, week out. They sort of smashed the rest of the team in terms of votes throughout the year. So they're our most consistent players for sure.
And you'd have to think that that's going to be a pretty representative of the outcomes on Wednesday night for the Bluey Truscott Award. The Petrarca, I think, has been the standout this year, and I suspect all those other guys will be in a pretty similar sort of format as to what the Demonland voters have come up with.
Is that up in Queensland? They're having that, George, or do they? What's the deal? Do they come back from Queensland now, or?
I got an email from the club. Join us as we award the 2020 Keith Bluey Truscott Memorial Trophy from our hub on the Sunshine Coast. Yep, so it is. Wednesday, 23rd of September, broadcast begins at 7 p.m. So it's you can stream it on melbournefc.com.au or the official club app or their Facebook page or their YouTube channel. So there's plenty of avenues for you to watch that. So that should be good.
What could go wrong? A bunch of young men up on the Gold Coast or Maroochydore having been knocked out and staying around in a hub with all bets off. Like, geez.
Well, you'd think a lot of them are probably going to stay in Queensland or in some non-lockdown state. I don't think many would want to come back because a lot of their partners are up there, families are. So they might stay there and have a little bit of a holiday. Certainly wouldn't want to come back here and have to be stuck in your house for another couple of weeks. So that's the thing. Let's move on. Mitch Brown. I really hope we give this guy another contract. He's the wrong side of 30, but he gives it a crack in every game that I've seen him play. Leads up the ground well, provides a target, can take a mark. He doesn't have the turning circle of a Titanic. I'd like to see him score a few more goals, but I'm very happy with the 20 disposals and 13 marks that he got this week. Just some stats on him. His season average of 5 games is 11.4 disposals, 7.8 kicks, 6 marks, and 0.4 goals. For comparison, T-Mac from 9 games had 8.6 disposals, so he's had 3 less, 5.6 kicks, about 2 less kicks, and 3.2 marks, so 3 less marks, and only a tiny bit is 0.8 goals. Wiedemann from 13 matches had 7.7 disposals, so he's less than that. 4.5 kicks, he's less on the kicks. 3.2 marks, so he's less in the marks, and 1.5 goals average. Mitch Brown has them pretty much covered in all of that except the goals. So I would look. That's only from 5 games, so we don't know what he'll do in 18 games or 23. I'd like to see him get at least another year contract. George, what are your thoughts on Mitch Brown?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think we need to keep Mitch Brown. More importantly, I don't think Wiedemann's showing enough at the moment, particularly if Wiedemann's the sole focus up forward. T-Mac is potentially injured in some way at the moment, whether he can come back, but we just need that big body up there. I don't think it's right to expect Jackson to come in next year. His body still will take a couple of years to develop. And if you've got a guy who's just going to play every game that Mitch Brown's capable of, kick a goal or two like he has, it's exactly what he did at Essendon. And wouldn't Essendon be screaming out for a Mitch Brown playing in their side today? So I think we need to keep him on, because if we don't keep him on, we could potentially be throwing a couple of young players to the Wolves next year. I think we just need to have him around.
The other thing about Brown that really highlighted in this last couple of games is his running up the field. And if you remember in 2018 when T-Mac was really playing his best footy, sure, he was kicking goals and taking his chances with his accuracy, but he did a lot of running up the ground, and so did Hogan in that year, 2018, probably more so even Hogan. That sort of tall forward who gets a lot of his kicks across the opposition's half-forward flank. He pushed up high in both these last 2 games. In fact, in all the games he's played, Brown, and I think that running for a tall forward, it can't be underestimated how important that is. And I remember a few games back you mentioned, Andy, that Wiedemann had done quite a lot of running, or that second in the running totals for the game. And I think that's changed. He's playing deeper, and Brown's playing that player up the ground, and you just need that now. I think sort of most teams seem to have that forward who, really provides an outlet kick, but you just need, like Hogan's probably the exact model that we've lacked. So we probably need him to play that role, and it doesn't seem to be anyone else coming through that could play that role. I guess Jackson does to an extent, but Jackson's unlikely to have the tank that Mitch Brown does, you'd think, at his age.
Yeah, agreed. Jaden Hunt, I was really impressed with his game, and we'll talk about the 3/4 time incident later, but 4 goals is good reward. This is the output you'd like to see from Hunt, but where to now for Jaden? I believe it's the last year on his contract. Last year, he was our highest goal scorer playing as a forward. He's struggled to get a game this year. He's ended up playing only 6 of the 17 games. And as I mentioned, I believe he's out of contract. Big man, what are your thoughts on Jaden Hunt? Do we persist with him? He's been a bit inconsistent, but we know that he can score goals, and we sort of need some scorers.
It's a really tricky one, because from a player who you'd think on the face of it should be pretty flexible in where you can play him, he's sort of running out of positions where he can be played. I think the way footy's now sort of headed even in the short time that he's been in footy, so 5-6 years, is teams are setting up behind the ball, and he's got no space to run into. So his weapon off the halfback flank is taken away from him because he's not given that space to run into and carry the ball. So the other position is really the wing for him. So I would have thought the wing it might be a spot for him, but he's sort of outside the 50. Ironically, his field kicking is not that strong, and I say ironically because inside 50, his kicking for goal is excellent, and a couple of his goals, he did something that a lot of Melbourne players don't seem to have the ability to do, which drives me nuts, which is balance up and slow down a bit as he's kicking for goal. And his set shots are excellent, and that goal he kicked on the run from 30 odd, where he balanced up, was an excellent kick as well. So, he must be on the bubble of being cut, but like we need players who can kick accurately. But he's a bit like T-Mac in that respect. He's an accurate kick for goal, but a pretty terrible field kick. And I always tend to think that, remember that game against, I think it was Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval, where he got collected by one of the Crows' hips, like he ran flat out into his hip. I always feel like that's something sort of shifted in his game after that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but he just never seemed to have been the same player since that incident. It was a big hit.
I remember that hit very well because I was about 10 metres away from it when it happened. I think it was Sam Jacobs he ran into more than Sam hit him, but he just hit the deck like a sack of spuds. I'm trying to get that out of my mouth. It was something shocking, and he was out straight away before he did even hit the ground. It was something, but yeah, that's the enigma of Jayden, isn't it? Unfortunately, people see this game and they go, "Great game from him. He kicked the 4 goals, and you can't complain about that by any stretch." But in the 6 games that he's played this year, he's had a grand total of 35 touches, 7 tackles in 6 games, and no tackles in the last 3 games. He's not on his own in that respect. But again, the goals that he's kicked 4 in this game, and he kicked 3 against Carlton, and not much else in the rest of them. So, what's his value? He's got this great running ability, but like Bin Man said, the double line of defence that most teams are now running means that there's no space to run through. He's fantastic, as we saw on the weekend when he gets out the back. But what are you going to do with him for the other sort of 3 3/4 of the game when that situation doesn't present itself? So, yeah, he's a bit of an enigma, and he is out of contract this year. He's not on his own there, but it's going to be some hard decisions made at the end of the year. I hope he hasn't put himself in a position where he's expendable, but we have to wait and see.
And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, again, because you can't see it on television, you can't tell how much defensive running he's doing to stop the spread. So, he might be playing his role and working hard defensively to get across and cover the outlet. And with his speed, you'd hope that that's definitely a factor. But as you say, George, that's the problem with low possession players, and Wiedemann's in the same boat. 5-6 possessions a game, well, you then got to kick your goals. And if, it's great that he kicked goals, but if suddenly you go through a couple of matches where you don't score a goal, your value to the team, even if you are doing the defensive running, drops right away. You really need players getting, particularly tackles as well, because tackles aren't really a factor about, your team role and running. Everyone should be getting a tackle a game.
Bailey Fritsch, leading goal kicker for the D's this year, and all I can really say about Fritsch is they need to investigate and work on his set shot kicking. Perhaps it's above the shoulders. Maybe it's the mechanics of his kicking style. I'm not too sure. Something is definitely up. And look, his problem's not getting the ball. He's got a small frame, but he can still take a mark, and so that's not the issue. But 3 goals, 4 this week. He's had 22 goals, 24 for the season. Previous years, last year was 20 goals, 16. The year before, 17 goals, 12. So he's kicked his most goals, but he's also been a lot less accurate this year. But having a look at the other years, he wasn't terribly accurate, still kicked a lot of points. So I think that's something they've got to look at, because he's getting the ball, he's just not converting, and 3 goals for can hurt you. I obviously love the 3 goals, but I'd love 7 goals more than that. George?
Yeah, but Bailey's he's done exactly what we need him to do. He's that small forward. He's kicking 20 goals a season. You can't ask for much more than that from a second stringer effectively, or even a third stringer. He's been our leading goal scorer for the last 2 years. Only Petraka's the only one who's sort of behind him. It'd be really nice if he could just nail those goals, particularly early on. He seems to get better and better as the games go on and gets into the swing of it. But he had 2 really bad misses in that first quarter. If he'd nailed that, the game would have been over in that first quarter well and truly, and we would have been on our way to a 10-goal win. But it's always concerning when one of your supposedly better kicks is 35 and 40 metres out on slight angles and still doesn't get the ball through the goals. It's very frustrating for us as Melbourne supporters, but like I said, you can't complain about someone who's kicking 20 goals a year as number three in the forward line, maybe number 4 in the forward line.
Yeah, there was talk on Demonland about Gunston being out of contract, and would we look at him? I'm not sure that really you'd need. I mean, Gunston's a terrific player, fantastic. One of my favourite non-Melbourne players, actually.
How old is he?
I think he's 31, 32. So, I mean, Hawks are no guarantee for trading him, but or retiring him. I'm not sure what the description is. But, I mean, really, Fritsch plays that role, so he's not as good. I'm not saying he's as good as Gunston, but you've already got a player who's kicking, as George notes, he's 20, 25 goals. I tend to think with his goal kicking, there's 2 factors. One, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, he takes a lot of his kicks from the boundary. That wasn't the case in his misses early on. But to me, it seems there's a good chance it's psychological, just in terms of those misses, because he's technically looks pretty good. Technically, he looks like a really good kick. So, and again, the commentators love the ball in his hand, except Melbourne fans don't, because he misses them. One thing I'll say about Fritter, though, he's a natural footballer, and I love how he uses his body in the marking contest. He's terrific with the ball in the air and reading it, and just positioning his body. And he could teach Wiedemann a thing or two about how to position your body to maximise your chance of out-positioning your defender. So I thought he's really played solid footy for the last 3-4 games. It was a pity he got dropped for that game for sleeping in. And but yeah, he's been, I reckon, apart from his kicking, he's been a real a shining light this year, actually. And he's gone up in my estimation.
He's also out of contract, I believe. That's correct. Yeah. Surely they'll sign him up. I know there was a thread on Demonland to say trade him. I haven't really sort of dipped into that thread because I think it's ridiculous, but you wouldn't think he's going to be on the trade table.
No, absolutely not. And I think Binman hit it on the head. What are you going to trade for a Bailey Fritsch? You have to go out and go chasing a Gunston type if he was ever available in the first place. But there's not too many decent players around. You're just going to be giving up one good player for another good player. I don't know that you're going to get any great addition. You're not going to get a Jeremy Cameron for a Bailey Fritsch, but you are going to get something pretty equivalent.
All right, let's move on. Jake Melksham was used as a tagger again this week. Was minding Shields. I'm not sure whether he was the whole day. He definitely was early on. Shields had 25 possessions and a goal. Melksham had 8 touches and 0 tackles. George, as you love to point out. For me, that experiment has been a clear failure for the past few weeks. There were a lot of people calling for Melksham to be dropped, but they've tried to bring him into the game by putting him into the middle in that tagging role. It seems to me 2020 hasn't been a great year for Jake. Binman, thoughts on Melksham?
Yeah, it's look, I don't know what leadership he provides off field. I don't know what the structure. The argument about him being a forward line leader has taken away a bit when you take him out of the forward line, I would have thought. So I have been down on Melksham all season, been pretty vocal about it as well, both on the podcast and on Demonland. And I really think that there was an error early on not dropping him because it wedges the coach. Once, if you don't drop a player who doesn't take their turn, when you do drop a player for not taking their turn like they did with Bennell, it sends a very strange message, and everyone can see it. And there, I lost a lot of respect actually for Melksham this year and his inability to put his body on the line. And there was a moment in this game, I think we're 24 points up, maybe they'd kicked a goal. But we were still on top of the game, and it was sort of fizzling at that point. And he absolutely took a big short step into a contest up in our forward line, and it was just absolutely, not AFL standard physical effort. Took a short step, and the ball got whisked out of our back half and ended up in the hands of Stewart, who marked on the lead up the other end, unfortunately on the one, I think, where he completely outfoxed Smith, who I know we're talking about next.
We'll talk about next.
Yeah. But they kicked the goal, and suddenly it was 18 points. And I thought to myself, that's where you lose a game of footy. That's exactly where we've got the momentum. We hadn't kicked a goal, 24, suddenly 18. The commentators get that stupid tone in their voice, all because Melksham refused to put his body on the line and take the hit that he had to take for the team. Basically took a sidestep, not much worse than the more evident one that the Essendon player allowed, what's his name, Midler through to kick his goal. As I said, the ball went straight out of our back half, our forward half, I should say, straight out of our forward line, 20 metres out from goal, straight up the other end for a goal to them, and they're back in the game all of a sudden. It was just, absolutely symbolic of how he's played all season, I reckon. And so if he doesn't improve that aspect of his game and his on-field leadership, I don't see what value he's bringing. He's not kicking goals. He's not, I don't care how big a leader he is off field. On field, he's shown zero leadership from my perspective.
This was a complete replica of last week when supposedly he was tagging Josh Kelly, and same story. Was it 7 or 8 touches and 0 tackles? I just don't know how the guy's kept his spot in the team for the whole season. Binman's absolutely right. He should have been dropped earlier on in the season. You can't. It's just sends such a horrible message to the rest of the team. He's a guy who is, obvious to the fans isn't performing. Would be even more obvious to his teammates that he's not performing. And while anybody can have a bad run at things for a couple of weeks, he's had 17 weeks this year where he's just not been up to scratch. I don't know what value he's bringing in terms of leadership, but again, as Binman said, the leadership is leading by example in games of football, and I'm not seeing too much example that anybody would want to be following coming from Melksham at the moment. I just don't know what to do with him. I suspect the coaches have thrown him into the middle because he's done absolutely nothing up forward. He won't put his body on the line. He won't go for marks. He's always looking for that cheapie out the back. I just don't know where you're going to put him in the side for next year. The fortunate thing is he's contracted for next year. Otherwise, maybe he might find himself on the trade table.
Well, he's contracted till 2022,
I
believe.
Yeah.
I just don't know what's going on. They've used him as a tagger the last couple of weeks. We've got a guy who's played his best footy as a tagger who's not in the team. They were playing Harms out of position all year, I thought. Was never a fan of him as a defender. This is the guy, if you're going to have a guy coming out and tagging, why not have a guy who played his best footy in finals, tagging some of the best players in the league? He can't even get a game. I don't know.
And also a tagger, Like we talked about it, I think 5-6 weeks ago, why they're not playing Harms as a tagger, because it seemed to be that they'd chosen not to. That few, most teams don't run a tagger. There's only a handful of teams that regularly run a tagger week in, week out. So we seem to have gone down the path of not having one. And then we do have one, but if I'm going to have if the D's are going to play a tagger, you want a tagger who's going to hurt their best midfielder with hard tackles and crunching them, and you want a tagger who gets in their face and makes their life hell. That's what and Harms was good at that. Like he was,
like Vince did to Dangerfield that day.
exactly. That's what 100%. That's exactly what you want a tagger to do. And I can't recall Melksham doing any of that against Kelly. That's exactly what he should have been in Kelly's face the whole game. And, you put a Viney on a Kelly. So, yeah, it was a curious decision. But I don't think he was on Shields the whole game. In fact,
No.
I couldn't work out where he was playing at one point.
You double up effectively when you've got a player the way Melsham's been playing in that tagging role. Is that not only is he not stopping the other guy, but when he's getting 7 and 8 possessions playing in the middle, it means that someone like a Viney or a Petrarca or an Oliver isn't in there with their own rotations. We're effectively running only 2 people in the middle. So it's not surprising that even though we've had ruck dominance, when Melcham's in the middle and not getting a touch on the ball, that the opposition are winning the clearances. It's just been awful to watch for the whole season.
Yeah, I must say, usually I watch the replay again at some point the weekend or before the podcast. I didn't this week because I was so frustrated with the way the season panned out. So I didn't get to look to see whether he was on Shields the whole time. Joel Smith is the next one we'll look at, George. I know you'll love this one. He's one of your favourite players, I believe. I thought had another nightmare of a game. Clearly, he's not to me. He's not a defender, and I know George, you wrote this in your report of the game that he just doesn't read the play well or the ball coming in well, and his opponent had a blinder. He kicked 3 goals. He kept them into the match. Look, I believe if Marty Hall was fit this year, he'd be in the team well ahead of Joel Smith. And like Hunt, Smith is out of contract. George, what's in Joel Smith's future?
Yeah, broken records coming from me again, unfortunately. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's another failed experiment, unfortunately. When we talk about Melcham and Harms, and Joel Smith's the third one, he's just not a natural footballer. He was on Stewart for 2 of the goals. Hibberd was on Stewart for his second one, I think, or his third. I can't remember which. But Smith was also on Laverde for their first goal. So in the game, he gave away 3 goals to his direct opponent. But each time that his opponent scored was Joel was just miles away from where he needed to be. I think it was telling the one that was it Laverde? I think might have been the first one. He was in front of Laverde. It was dead easy for Laverde to come out the back and off to the side to take the mark that he did. The one where Stewart completely turned him inside out to come around the back of the pack and take the mark in front of the goal was the same thing. He's just not aware of where the ball is and where his opponent is, and he just doesn't run to the right spots. He doesn't know where to go. He's not a natural footballer. So I just don't know what to do. Or what he's expected to do. I think Andy, you're absolutely right that if Marty Hall was available, then he'd be doing the job. But no, I'm afraid Joel Smith's the write-off for me.
So reading between the lines, George, you think he's got a future? I do think he has got a future, and just not as a defender.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally get that he's not a natural footballer as a sort of, but I think defending's tough. It's not just sort of playing man on man and anymore in terms of, it's that whole zone, knowing where it's coming in. I've said it all season. Play him up forward, give him a good run up forward, and tell him just to go bananas. Use his leap, use his athleticism. He takes up a defender. Go tackle, go crazy. Jump at the ball. Play free and just go for it. And still, do your running up the ground and do your fair share of defensive work as well. But up forward, it seems to me the more logical spot for him because he has to think less about the game. And, then his strengths, his literal strength, his athleticism and his one-on-one strength can be a weapon rather than up in the defensive half where he just seems to get lost.
Yeah, I agree. I've always preferred or wanted him to play up forward. I believe, George, you might be able to back me up. Last preseason, not this year's preseason, the one before, he was training the whole time as a forward. He got injured, I believe. He didn't play the whole of last year.
No, he got injured in the infamous game against the Brisbane Lions
that was
out
the
of
Brisbane,
Casey,
yes.
wasn't it? Where he kicked four, he kicked four in one leg off one leg.
On one leg, yes. Yeah, I've got my timelines right now. Yep. So that season, that preseason, the whole preseason he played.
That's right. Yeah.
He trained as a forward to play as that third tall forward or whatever, where we third forward. They've now this preseason, when we've got a full list available, so they could very well play him up there, they've decided to change him around as a backman. So
in a season where we've down on forwards, where they must have known T-Mac was a concern, and it's like it's another one of the selection decisions this year that have just left me scratching my head. My hair's falling out.
Yeah, and we've had sort of a pretty settled back six. And this is where I sometimes get frustrated with Goodwin, that he doesn't do in-game moves like that. Like we saw a couple where, he put May down forward, whatever, but he's never taken Joel Smith and put him in the forward line. It just frustrates me.
I thought of you, Andy, in the Dogs game when Beveridge was moving every second player to a new position.
I was just about to say, and I think we had a thread going for the Dockers game, and I said it in the thread. Look, this is a coach that makes moves during games. They lose a play, he makes moves. That's all I want, some moves. They don't always work, but I think Goodwin's just a bit stubborn, that he just thinks it's going to work. This is the way. This is the Melbourne brand. This is what we do. It's going to work. It's going to work.
He's a systems coach.
Yeah.
And Beveridge
we'll get it right at the next.
Yeah.
We'll reset. The next play we'll reset and we'll get it right this time. But sometimes you need to make out of the box moves.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is so out of the box. Anyway, look, I'm not the coach, so what do I know? Sam Wiedemann, he's had a shocking last couple of weeks of the season. He's barely made a dent on the scoreboard. Only had 7 touches this week. Probably should have had a goal, but gave it off to Hunt. An argument can be made, in fairness to him, that he's often up against 2 opponents, and that at least he's bringing the ball to the ground. But it's just not enough for me. Hopefully next year with Luke Jackson back in the mix, things will turn around, because I think he played his best footy with Luke Jackson around. But I don't know. It's been a disappointing end to the year, because he had a couple of good weeks in the middle, getting averaging 2 goals a game at one stage. But yeah, the last few weeks have been a bit disappointing.
Yeah, just not enough intensity, really. He doesn't play with enough intensity.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that Sam's really missing at the moment. I think was an interesting point, Andy, that you made, where he played his best footy this year when he had Jackson alongside him. I think he played his best football when he had Hogan alongside him in 2018 as well. I don't think he's a full forward of the focus type that you need. He's not of the same class as a Hawkins or a Cameron or a Charlie Dixon. He hasn't got that sort of killer instinct that those guys have. I'm always reminded of Hawkins in his first game when he played against Melbourne. I think he kicked 9 goals, and he probably would have kicked a dozen if the coach hadn't taken him off. But right from the very start, you knew Hawkins was going to be one of those type of demanding full forwards. even when Hogan was 17 and 18 years old, he was a demanding full forward. You knew what you were going to get from those sort of players, and I'm afraid I haven't seen any of that from Sam. I'd invite everybody to have a look at the. They've got all the goals up on the website, and have a look at Jaden Hunt's first goal and his last goal. In both of those situations, Hunt was basically running into an open goal. He's well inside 50, and Sam Wiedemann's running back into the goal square with his opponent. If that was Tom Hawkins would have been heading straight in the opposite direction to create another option and putting a second thoughts into the defender's mind. But Sam he just doesn't have that full forwards nous to be able to position himself on the right side, or to move to the position where you could probably get an easy hand pass or a kick when you're 15 metres out in front. But when you're running into the goal square, all you're going to do is see the ball go over your head, and hopefully it does. But he just doesn't have that killer instinct that Bin Man was talking about as far as I'm concerned either. So I don't know that we're going to see the best of Sam Wiedemann.
Well, is this a coaching thing? As in even our assistant coaching. Who's the forward coach?
It's the thing that it's a bit. Sam, I saw him play a practice game when I think it must have been in his first season at Collingwood's ground, and he looked great. Like he led hard. He looked a natural forward. It just seems that he also jumped well into the air and took took some good pack marks, but he just seems to have dropped away a bit. I mean, maybe the coaching plays a role. I don't know, but he just he doesn't seem to use his body well in the air. You don't have to be super strong like. As I was saying with Fritsch. Fritsch uses his body beautifully, and Weeds doesn't seem to have that same naturalness about using his body. And as George says, sort of not always running to the right spot. And the other thing at the moment is, I look at Oscar Allen. He really clunks his marks, and he must be only 21. And he just rips down those contested marks. And I'm struggling to think, when's all season been waiting for Weed to take one of those big pack marks, and you think, well, one day he'll rip it apart, but the games are starting to sort of stretch into the distance in terms of him not taking those marks, like Charlie Dixon. There's obviously, but he's 24, 25 next year. As I said, Oscar Allen rips those balls down, and they were super important now, those contested marks, because they're like gold, aren't they? They're hard to get. I think that's something that Gawn has done so well this year. He's taken his game to another level, Gawn. I've been super impressed with the way he's done it, and really on the back of his contested marking, he's unbelievable in the air.
We've seen it against us. Who was that? Port Adelaide. That young forward was clunking marks in his first year, in the first couple of games.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
On a positive note on the forwards, I thought Cozzy played just about his best game for the club. He looked fantastic. He looked like he'd sort of settled a bit. His tackling and intensity was everything that, say, Melksham's hasn't been. And he did an absolutely beautiful play to set up a goal to Hunt. I'm sure it was Hunt that he kicked it to, where the commentators mentioned it at the time, but he sort of didn't take possession of the ball and sort of waited a bit so he didn't get tackled, and tapped it forward. But what was really nice, and again, it's one of those things that so few players seem to have the ability at the Ds, and it drives me spare, is when he did collect, he kicked on his left, which was nice, but he paused and he just waited it into space so Hunt could move to the ball rather than sort of kick it too high or put it to his right. He just weighted it with the outside of his foot, which allowed Hunt just to move across. It was such a small thing, but a really clever use of the ball, and it just showed to me he is a natural footballer, like a complete natural, unlike Smith, for instance. I just think that he, with another pre-season under his belt and some encouragement to go for those goals, he's going to be something special for the Ds, and I'm really looking forward to seeing him live next year.
Speaking of weighted kicks, how was Petrarca's kick to Spargo for that It was ended up with Hunt, and that was the one where Wiedemann handballed it after Spargo. But that kick by Petrarca was just an absolute beauty.
Oh, wasn't it? And it was his second best kick of the night. The goal he kicked was
Yeah.
he flushed that ball.
While we're doing shout outs, I think we mustn't forget Rivers as well. Once again, I think this for the second week in a row, he basically saved the game for us with, I think it was less than 2 minutes to go. There was 7 points of difference, and it was Rivers who tackled Guelphy in the middle of the ground. The ball bounced out to Melcham, and Melcham then nailed it off to Fritsch for his first of 2 goals in the last 2 minutes. But once again, Rivers did the tackle that we had to nail, and he nailed it beautifully. And this is a first-year kid. He's fantastic. Another great pickup.
Yeah, and I think that was in some ways they righted a lot of wrongs last year with their recruiting, because I've been critical of their focus on those contested ball players like Jordan, which of course I hope he makes it, and even a sparrow,
The bird.
Sparrow, one of those birds, with 3 point of difference players in Jackson, Cozzy, and Rivers. Pat's, I mean, he's not a contested player, but he's quick. He's a neat kick, but I really like his attitude to the game. He's got he enjoys it. He's got a real strong will to win. So I think they're 3 really good selections. And I wonder a little bit, just from that pre-season footage of Taylor convincing, I think they're at Goodwin's home maybe, or at a holiday home or something, showing footage of Cozzy. I wonder whether he's been a bit hamstrung by who he can choose, and I think they might be Taylor's. Finally got sort of convinced the powers that be to, we need to add some X factor to this footy club, otherwise we're we're going to get Vanilla City for the next few years. And so all 3 of them are going to be great players for the D's and add something really different, and not least of which their energy. All of them have got really positive, up and about energy, which I think is super important and has been important at different times this year.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. Let's talk about that last quarter. With a season on the line, how did we let Essendon get within 7 points and have a sniff? We were 28 points up at halftime, and we're looking at winning by 8 to 10 goals. We just seem to fall asleep at various times during matches, week in, week out. Teams get a roll on against us, and we just cannot stem the flow of consecutive goals. Can either of you guys work out what's going wrong? How can we fix this? It simply cannot happen next year if we want to be a contender. If we want to make finals, we want to be up there, we want to win a premiership, we can't let this happen. And it's been a factor of our game for a long time. George, you want to start?
I'm the man with the answer suddenly. I've been watching this for the last couple of years, haven't I? I don't think it was just that last quarter fade out. It's this continually recurring theme of fade outs when we think we've got it all sewn up. Even in this game against Essendon, in the first quarter and in the third quarter, at the end of the third quarter, we gave up goals again in that last minute of the quarter. In the second quarter, just before half-time, the ball was bouncing around the Essendon forward line for about the last minute and a half, and we could have easily given up another goal there. We were leading, we had the game well and truly in our hands each time, and we've handed it back to them with this just lack of concentration, and all those goings on that we saw at the three-quarter time huddle only served to reinforce that view. You've just got to be focused for the whole time. It used to be 100 minutes for the game, whatever it is these days, but you've just got to be focused while you're out there. You just don't say, oh, we're 28 points up, we can now take a little rest, and you just give any side the opportunity to come back, and they certainly will. I don't know what the answer is. It's certainly in the head. You've got to develop an attitude with a certain number of players in the side that they never give up. It's promising when you do see players like Rivers and May and a couple of others who just don't give up no matter what. They go down fighting. We need those sort of players spread throughout the whole side. But yeah, there's a recurring theme that we're seeing here all too often.
It's interesting if you use the lens of those comments from Goodwin about your club needs to be more ruthless.
Yeah.
For me, that's where on-field lack of ruthlessness really comes to the fore, because the best teams, when you've got another team in any circumstance by the cosh, you just kick away, don't you? You kick your 50, 60 points away. You smash them. I mean, and to be fair, we have done a couple of times this season, but it's when we've got onto
that was in the last quarter. Those two games.
yeah, exactly. So as I say, so it's when we've got on top late and the other team's folded up like a cheap table. So we needed to be. I was, as I said, a back Melbourne over 39, and I put on the game day thread that we should easily run away. No problems with making that line, unless we showboat and take the foot off the accelerator, and that's exactly what we did. We didn't take our chances. That goal that you're talking about, George, where they scored in the last 30 seconds was so frustrating. One, because I was conscious of that line bet. Two, because it's the D's. But it wasn't just that we gave up a goal late. We had a chance to score a goal, and it was down our forward line, and we piss-farted around with it. And, the best clubs score a goal in that circumstance and go in with a 7-goal lead rather than give up a goal and go in with a 30-point lead. It was, that a ruthless club has, as you say, George, players right through at everything that win every contest. There's no half contest. There's no, well, I'm just about to have my break at halftime. Every contest is a binary thing. You're either a winner in that contest or you're a loser. And we need to have players who just want to win every contest right to the from the first siren to the end.
There was an incident that was captured on TV at 3/4 time. If you haven't seen the vision, here's a quick recap. Jaden Hunt squeezes Petrarca's bum. Petrarca reaches around, grabs Hunt's hand and places it back onto his bum for another squeeze. They break off from the huddle laughing. Now, the inappropriate touching has been in the headlines all year this year. We've seen this issue be scrutinised by the media. The AFL have denounced this type of locker room behaviour as being unacceptable. The clubs, no doubt, have warned their players against this. Consensual or non-consensual, it's a terrible look and needs to be called out. For mine, what got me just as upset, because look, that stuff, we're well past that in this modern day. And this, what upset me, and it hasn't really been called out by the media, is that we had two players who were piss-farting around during the coach's address at 3/4 time before arguably our most important quarter of the season. Sure, we had a healthy lead and looked like we were going to cruise to victory. But as we've pointed out many times on this podcast, and we just talked about it now, we have this habit of going to sleep and not being switched on and go on to concede multiple goals. And this is the exact thing that happened after 3/4 time, after these guys did this. And now you can argue that, that Petrarca and Hunt played okay after that. But this behaviour, it also shows a lack of respect for the coach and for their teammates. When finals are on the line, we nearly lost this game. We were 7 points up. They could have easily have gone on. They had the run on. They could have won. And perhaps I'm making too much out of it, a storm in a team cup. But it's not a good look for so many reasons. And as a supporter, I don't want to see players not being 100% focused, on what, going into the game. And, they can fuck around all they want at the end of the game, behind closed doors, whatever. And now they've got plenty of time to do that. They've got 6 months or whatever until the season starts. But with the game on the line, you got to be focused. And I thought, I saw it at the time and I thought, that's a terrible look. This is not what I want to see. I want them to be focused, listening to the coach and going out there and doing the job. Big man.
Yeah, for me, I'm a little less concerned about the inappropriate touching. Though the thread title made me laugh
Yeah,
every
yeah.
time. When
Well, I will say the thread title was actually a lot worse before I changed it, but I won't mention that on air.
I didn't see and I didn't see it at 3/4 time. I just saw it on Demonland, the title for what the hell is that about? Touching. And then there's another one on the site today, urinating in public. It's like, well, what's happening to Demonland? My concern in hindsight, because I didn't see it at the time, was what exactly is he saying? What are they doing? Well, their head's not in the game. And then we ended up throwing away a match.
Yeah.
So what would have happened if we'd lost that game? All hell would have broken loose.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, if we'd lost that game of footy after being 34 points up at our highest, our biggest lead, if we'd lost that game of footy, who knows? That might have been the end of Goodwin. That would have just been like you'd lose the Swans of the Freo game. That's bad. Lose this game after being 34 points up, and you've got two fellas having a grand old laugh at 3/4 time when they should be listening to the coach. Yeah, I'm with you on that. It was a bad look. I mean, it goes to exactly what we were just talking about. The footy's all about momentum, isn't it? It always has been. And you lose it, it's very hard to get back. So on that, I think that there's two things, is that leadership plays a big factor in stopping momentum. And leadership isn't just what you do, during the quarter. It's focus on your coach and that sort of rubbish. They just look like a couple of private school boys who thought, well, we're 6 goals up here, we'll smash them. This is all done and dusted. So, and as you say, we ended up getting to as close as 7 points. So the whole focus would have been completely different if we'd lost that game. It wouldn't have been about the touching. It would have been about this club's a joke, and we would have brought it on ourselves.
Can't add much more than that, than what both of you have said. It's just this lack of ruthlessness and professionalism that annoys me. You wouldn't have seen anything remotely like that from, say, a Patrick Dangerfield or a Dustin Martin. They're just focused on winning the game and winning it by as much as possible and completely destroying their opponents. They're out to win. Our guys seem to be out to just have a good time in a game. You've got to change the focus completely at this level of sport. You are out there to win no matter what the costs, and doing these sort of ridiculous things is just simply beyond me, at least. So.
And there's a theory that I've heard a number of times over the years from a number of people, but coaches, that teams play their first quarter much in the same way that they did their last quarter of footy. So there's an emphasis on, even if you're having a bad game, finish off that last quarter well, so the next week that that's what you flow into. And so if we had have made the finals, that would have been our previous quarter heading into the finals, a quarter where a team that was a rabble. It was a joke that we weren't 10 goals up at halftime. They were letting us run the ball down. They weren't even wanting to tackle us. And that's how it felt at 3/4 time, as if this was a sort of bit of a lark. What sort of preparation for a cutthroat game in Perth would have that been if, letting the Bombers get back within 7 points? So, I'm totally on board with what you're saying, Andy.
Then the next incident happened sort of not at the game, Harley Bennell, and this one's really disappointing. According to reports in the Herald Sun, Harley went for a drink on Friday night in the club's resort, which is permitted, but then left the hub to visit a friend on Saturday, which was a clear breach of the COVID rules. Apparently, he left the hub to swap a vehicle and secure a car seat for his daughter. He ran out of petrol on the trip and was found by police, who drove him to the petrol station to fill up. He was breath tested by police, and they believe he was under the limits. I think it's come out now that he also went to ex-teammate Jared Harbrow's house, and he didn't let him in for whatever reason. But anyway, he's ended up being outside the hub and not being allowed back in. I think, from what I've heard, is that one of his friends that he went visited actually reported him, and that's what I've read. And then Melbourne have self-reported to the club. But the end result is the D's have been fined $50,000, which, given everything that's happened this year financially with COVID is the last thing we can afford, and I assume that some of that is suspended because that's what's happened with some of the other clubs. Sorry, George.
No, it's not.
It's not what we have to pay that 50,000 when other teams only had to pay half of that.
Yeah,
Because this is our second
it's our
case.
second.
Yeah. So you continue on. I'll give some other background.
So Bennell's also been suspended for 4 matches. Look, apparently from the talk, and I don't know how true this is, the club was keen to keep him in the red and blue next season, but the prospect of contract extension might be unlikely now. I don't know. Can you, George? You can take the next one. You can add to that. But can you see the club keeping Bennell on now, given what's transpired? Not whether you think he should. Or you can also say whether you think he should stay on, because I'd like to see him stay on, but after this, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a great big slap in the face to the club that took him on from obscurity and sort of a finished career, and took a chance with him and invested in him. It's no small amount of time and effort that has gone into getting him at least up to the five games that he played this year. So, yeah, it was not only particularly stupid, it was insulting to the club, and no doubt people who've been supporting him all along. The double whack to the club is the $50,000 fine doesn't probably need to be paid in dollar terms, in the sense that it comes off the soft salary cap for next year. So we won't be able to afford to pay for, say, a part-time physio or a part-time coach. So it's going to affect us for the whole of next year as well. It's not just this one-off event where you can throw 50 grand away down the river. That's the really disappointing part. As to whether he stays around, there's plenty of discussion on Demonland about it. It's going to come down to the football department's assessment, I think, about whether he's going to add value to us next year. If there are rookie positions available on the list, I wouldn't be offering him any more than that for the coming year. Simply because that'll be a way of paying back the $50,000 deficit that the club's been forced to take on as a result of his stupidity. So it'll be an interesting scenario, but I just don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what the football club's assessment of his capabilities are.
Big man.
Yeah, look, I'd hold my sort of commentary personally for me in terms of what I I don't know the circumstances, and it's possible there's dramas going on. I'm guessing he's not in a great headspace. It's a bit of a concern. He's got his partner or his wife and his little kid up there in the hub, as I understand it, and he's out, and I'm not sure what the deal is, whether they're going to leave, but they're probably thinking we're in a hotel, where we're going to go, and my understanding is he's been told he has to leave the state as soon as possible.
Yeah,
but
that's what I heard.
Yeah, Sam Ebden in that clip that was on SEN suggesting that he's not responding to the club's contact. It might get worse in terms of that. So that suggests to me that maybe something's happened, or he's not in a great headspace. So that would be my number one, sort of concern, I guess, is let's see what the full story is. And I think that, it's definitely disappointing. It's, for all the reasons George said. I'll hold my fire in terms of hearing the full context. Whether he plays on, I hope he does. But I also agree with George and you, Andy, in terms of it's a football decision. If they think that he's got a good year in him, well, I think that I'd love to see him play on. I'd be really disappointed, leaving the COVID stuff aside. I'd be really disappointed if he's not at the footy club next year, because he's exactly his talent and ability is exactly what we need. And again, taking it back to Melksham, there's no question that he got dropped after that Adelaide game because he wasn't physical enough. But nor has Melksham been. So that's what creates problems at a footy club, when one player gets treated differently to another.
Yeah. Bulldogs Dockers game. I believe I'm assuming both of you watched that with as much intensity as you watch a D's game. It rounded out the trifecta of bad news and bad publicity for the D's. And I thought at times the Dockers played very, very Melbourne-like. Well, I was frustrated as much as I am for a D's game with some of their plays, some of their forward 50 entries, and some of the turnovers that were kicked straight down the throat of Bulldogs players. Was frustrating to watch, and I sort of gave up sort of early on in the last quarter. I turned it off. I'd had enough.
I watched it to the very end because it was just like a D's match. You can't leave. So
No, I could leave that one.
when
Watching.
I thought I was in some Netflix sci-fi sort of alternate reality movie when Hogan lined up, and I thought to myself, "There's no way he's going to miss kick this." And sure enough, he shanks it to the. It's like if he's a Melbourne player in a purple jumper. Yeah, it was a painful game to watch, and it was a funny emotion too because it was sort of, especially in the second quarter, it was eking away, and they were, the game was drifting away, and they were lucky to be. I think they were only 12 points down at halftime.
Yeah, they got to three goals down, but then they got a goal on the right near the end of at halftime.
Yeah, and they were just running on the spot. And again, like I said at the beginning, the Bulldogs weren't playing great in that first half, but they executed. They executed under pressure. They did the things that they needed to do. They've got some players that I really just think are fantastic footballers. I'm glad the commentators gave a shout out to Liberatore, because just like he was against us, he was fantastic in that game. And, there's a player who says, I'm going to show some leadership. I'm going to tackle. I'm going to get the ball. I'm going to kick it. To advantage. I'm going to do the things my team needs me to do, sacrifice my game if I need to. And Daniels as well plays similar, but I just think he's the best kicker in the league, Daniels. He barely misses a target. The Bontempelli, he didn't have much impact, I didn't think, but what he does do when he does it, he executes. So, that executing, not missing those targets makes such a big difference.
It was interesting watching two teams play to their technique, wasn't it? That they had a particular style that they wanted to impose on the games, and the Bulldogs eventually imposed theirs more than what the Dockers did. And I think the Dockers would have had more success if they had players firstly available. They were missing half their back line.
And they'd missing half their forward line.
Half their forward line as well.
Forward line.
Yeah. But it was interesting because Longmuir is coaching his group of players to work to a system, and it certainly was successful in certainly the first quarter and maybe up to about half time. But the Bulldogs showed exactly what ruthlessness is all about. Even though they were down at times, they weren't playing well. They just kept on doing. They kept on working. They work the ball to the outside, which is where they love to have the ball. And as Binman said, they've got some players capable of delivering the ball just magnificently. You do wonder how Daniel, the size that he is, just doesn't get pummeled every week, but he just moves away at the right time. His kicking is just absolutely first class. And when you can afford to have a player like Bontempelli, probably only put in one quarter that was really outstanding, and the rest of it was pretty ordinary in that sense. But when you can afford to have a player like that not playing his best and still completely dominate the whole game as a team rather than just individuals, they'll go a long way again this year. That style of play will always succeed more often than not.
And they've got, we'll talk about a bit later in terms of who we should be targeting in the trade, but they have got excellent kicks right across the board, and they have targeted excellent kicks. They've made it a recruiting emphasis to go after players with a average, above average to elite kicks, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's their number one thing that they've looked for, because as we talked about a few weeks back, you can, teach a player to be more competitive or, be more contested, but you can't teach an AFL player to be much better than a kick if they're coming average. And where I think you're so right, George, in terms of it was fascinating to watch two different styles. Longmuir was very much like Goodwin in the sense he's a systems coach. He's got a system. He's drilling his team into understanding that system and believing in the system, knowing where everyone's role is in that system. And Dogs have got another one, but it's a bit more fluid and a bit more, like a not quite so robotic almost. And that sort of battle between the two ways of playing and, the Dogs trying to get it on their terms. And they eventually did. And for me, there was a point in the match where that actually happened, where they went through the centre, and I forget who kicked it. It might have been Richards even, or where they finally got a goal after a sustained period of pressure, and it was a sort of more direct up the corridor, but it was the first kick that they cut into the centre and hit that target and then released up forward. And you need skill to hit that target, and you need that drilled for everyone, being in their right spot. And we simply don't have enough players who can do that. So in this, without skipping forward, but we really need to target that sort of skill by foot. Beveridge has been terrific in that sense. They've got right across the board, they've got really good kicks.
The other thing I really like about the Bulldogs is across the board their willingness to run. And you look at Lockie Hunter; he just seems to be in every spot on the ground.
Right, he's like Langdon, isn't he?
Yeah. And we've got one of Langdon. Well, they seem to have half a dozen who are just relentless. And when they get the ball, they move the ball as a team. By simply running and providing options and moving up the ground. It's fantastic to watch. It's very similar to what Richmond do. And, we're talking about two teams that have won premierships in the last couple of years. Maybe that's the style that we've got to start following, getting more of these committed runners and people who are prepared to put in for 100% of the time.
But what the Dogs and the Tigers have got that we've got is that sort of ability to get contested ball winners, football contest out players, but they marry it with that, as you say, that hard running, but also foot skills. I think it's really underestimated how skillful Richmond are, for instance. They've got a lot of high quality kicks, and modern footy, you just need it, because even if you're not using it as an offensive weapon, you need it to be able to pick your way through a zone. You need to be hitting your 80% of those easy kicks, not 60%, because that gap is where you give up the 2 or 3 goal differential. So, they've got a lot going for them, haven't they? And in Beveridge, they've got a coach who is everything in some respects that Goodwin isn't. He's creative and willing to try things, and wears his heart on his sleeves. You hope that they go far now that they've knocked us out.
Well, the end result of that match was us obviously not making the finals. Nothing went right for us this week besides us actually winning the game. But having said all that, was the season. It's obviously it's a silly question. I'm not going to ask you whether this season's a success, because clearly not making finals is a failure. So where to from here? The club made a big statement last year saying, finals, that's where they want to be, and we didn't make it. So where to from here? Obviously, I don't believe they're going to pull the pin on the coach. I think Goodwin will be coaching next year. So what do we do? Obviously, there's issues with. But for me, I would like to see some changes in the assistant coaching at the club. But is there going to be the money for that? Where to, George? What can we do?
What can we do? Here's the answer again.
No pressure.
No pressure. We get more players in who can play football is the first thing. Since you can't sack the coach, that's about all you can do. Look, it's difficult. At the end of the day, like I said, I think we finished up about where we honestly should have been. We weren't in the same league as a Geelong or a Richmond or
any or even the Brisbane at the moment. We're just not within. We might have got close in the games that we played against them, but it's that lack of ruthlessness. You look at the way Geelong dispose of lower ranked sides, and we struggle to get over the line against them. At the end of the season, your percentage becomes critical. We wouldn't have had that problem. Worried about the St Kilda game if we'd done better during the season. We're obviously better positioned than what we were at the end of last year, but last year was basically an injury depleted season, so you can almost write that off. But where are we after finishing in the finals in 2018 compared to today? We've obviously dropped off, although we once again, even in 2018, we got over the line in the end, but it was a real struggle again. We're just not there yet. What I hope is that we pick up or trade well. I don't think we're going to finish up with enough draft picks to be picking at the top end again, particularly in a highly compromised draft. But I think we need to trade heavily, as say St Kilda did last year, to get in those 3-4 players that will make the difference to the side. We need to elevate ourselves from that, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 position that we seem to be honestly stuck at the moment. It's a very dangerous position because you don't get the good draft picks and you don't get to play the finals as well. And the supporters are really searching for some success at last. We can't afford to keep sitting for year after year where we are. And the other thing that we've got to keep at the back of the mind is, Jack Viney's 26 now. What happens with him, we don't know. A lot of conjecture going on. But so are our basic core group, sitting between that 24, 25, 26 range. We don't want to be wasting the time trying to get players into the side for the next 3 years. We'll suddenly find that those talented players that we do have are at the wrong end of 20, and we don't have enough coming through at the other end. So we need to be really, really working hard, I think, at the trade table this year.
Well, we're going to have to be ruthless because we might have to give up some names that people might not be comfortable giving up, either to improve our draft or to trade for other talent.
For me, the season, like, it's easy to focus on the Freo game and the Swans game, and obviously if we win one of those games, we make finals. So, well, it's actually not that obvious because we might then have lost to the Giants. Who knows? So, you don't know how things happen. But the obvious one is to focus on those two games and the question mark about, well, what was going on with selection in that period of time with 20 changes over 4 games. What was happening? There's something going on there. To the exact time of the year that you want to have as consistent a selection policy and team as possible. We're chopping and changing all over the place, and we played as like a team that lacked cohesion. So those games will live long in all D's fans' memories as the ones that got away. But really, it's a bit like those missed goals in a first quarter. If you use that analogy, is you don't think of them, you think about the missed goals in the last quarter. But the loss against the Tigers, the loss against the Cats, they're the ones that really stick in my craw. Both of those games were just horrible. We should have won both of those games, and even the arguably, perhaps less so, but the Brisbane game. So there's 3 games against top 5, maybe other top 4. Yeah, three of the top 4 teams we should have beaten, and certainly 2 of them we could have. I think back to Tomlinson not balancing up for that shot against Richmond. So I think that they were real. They were the heartbreakers as much as the and more so perhaps. We win, one of those games and we make it. So I think I'll reflect back on those ones. I think, on a more positive note, we won 9 games, so that's over 50% in a normal home and away season. 12 wins is going to get you into the finals most year. It wouldn't be too many teams finishing with a percentage of 105, 106, whatever it was we finished on outside the 8. So that's another positive. And, without wanting to to fall on excuses. And I know people hate excuses, and me too. In terms of, I've seen enough non-finals appearances over the years, but we have had a terrible year in terms of the draw we've played. We started the year with a brilliant draw. We ended it with playing all over the country, playing it with no benefit at all, playing each team once, something that I like actually. But we at one stage we played 7 of 8 games at different venues, and I think 4 different states in that period. Something was not quite right in Cairns. I reckon you'll find that there's that Viney will go, and I wonder whether there's some sort of rumblings in the team. That's just I've no inside intel at all. It's just my gut feel. And so, who knows? The whole COVID situation and the hub thing is an extreme situation. The other factor I think that's been overlooked quite a lot is our game plan is built for full 20-minute quarters, not the 16-minute quarters, because we're a red time we're a red time team. Where we take full benefit of our contested style of footy and our at the man style in that last 2-3 minutes of each quarter. That's where we tend to do best. So I think that was another big disadvantage for us this season. So, in some respects, there's some positives not making it, because they can now all get half cut up in Queensland and get on the piss and make the news, and let's hope that doesn't happen. So
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the shortened year. The teams we would have played twice this year: Fremantle, St Kilda, Sydney, Carlton, and Gold Coast. Given how we went against Sydney and Fremantle, we might not have beaten them again. St Kilda, they've been playing well this year, might not have beaten them the second time, and Carlton are just one of those teams that always take us to the line, and might have beaten the Gold Coast again. So who knows?
And next year we get what? We get the benefit of finishing 9th, which is not much benefit at all. So, yeah.
Well, look, we don't know. They might only do I know they don't want to do 17 next year, do they? 18 rounds next year. They want. I saw one report they want to do like 50 games or something.
Yeah, they'll double it, not half it.
Look, we'll move on there. A few good things. We in their club announced that they re-signed Jaguar for season 2021. That's on the back of also re-signing the other co-principal partner, Zurich, for 2021. That's good news, given the financial situation, to re-up those sponsorships. Is very important, and well done to the club for being able to secure that, especially after such a crappy year. And I'm happy with that.
It is critical, isn't it, that in this year that we've signed up Zurich and Jaguar again. Money's going to be tight coming, particularly in the coming months. We don't need to be, as probably some clubs will find themselves in the situation of going into January, perhaps without major sponsors. This just adds surety to the club off field, and when we combine that with the situation that the club supporters have chipped in money to be able to avoid the AFL assistance situation. The off-field side of things is doing as well as can be possibly expected given the current circumstances. So big shout out to be able to achieve that.
The other positive is that we might get a few players in the All-Australian team that's going to be announced in the next couple of weeks. Who can we expect to get a look in? Surely Petrarca. I think Gawn might even get the ruck position.
100% will, if he has to.
Yeah.
Like, who else would get it? I mean...
Yeah, Grundy's had a disappointing year. Goldie's sort of fallen away. I think he has to. I'd love to see... I don't think I've said this a few times, I don't think he'll get in the final team, but I'm really hoping he gets in the squad. Definitely deserves it. Another player I'd love to get into the squad is Langdon. I think he's been superb on the wing all year, and it'd be nice for him to get into the squad. I don't think he'd get into the final team.
You'd hope you'd really hope that Oliver does, because I'm probably guilty of it as well, of underestimating how well he plays week in, week out.
Yeah.
Oliver.
Yeah, we don't talk a lot about him on the podcast,
Yeah.
just because he does those Oliver things.
Part of it is his kicking lets him down a fair bit. He's been so much better, as we've talked about, getting distance and getting metres, but then, he lets himself down with his kicking. But so does Dangerfield, for instance. Dangerfield's a shocking set shot. And so you hope with his numbers. Like, I was really amazed at the stats you read out earlier on at the beginning of the show, Andy, in terms of, was that second in the league for contested possessions?
First and second for Oliver and Petrarca.
Oliver number one for contested possessions in the league. That's amazing. So that's got to put him in contention. He's had a better year than when he made it his other All-Australian.
Yeah,
his first All-Australian.
Yeah,
and I reckon May's a good chance, because he's finished the season super strong. He's played well in big games. I haven't really watched Brisbane enough to know how well Andrew's been travelling, but May's got a lot of love in the last few weeks of how he played in big games.
It'll be a fair competition between May and Harris Andrews, but Andrews is injured and has been for the last couple of weeks, so that might work in May's favour. But knowing the way the All-Australian stuff is put together, you might find both of them in there in the back line in some way, shape or form, because those two players are really the standouts in terms of backs for the season. I don't know that there's too many others. McGovern from the Eagles might be in, but he's been injured as well. I think the way May's been playing, and the media's been noting the way May's been playing as well, so his name's out there.
And you had another coach trolling you, Andy, with May giving Danaher a complete and utter bath, and then the game gets changed when Danaher gets moved, and another creative move gets moved into the ruck, and so it's a different game.
He started playing well, so... the other thing we can probably look forward to is Brownlow night. I don't think Track will be able to claw his way and beat Lockie Neal. He's been a standout, but it'd be nice if Track can get a podium finish, that's for sure. So
I reckon he'll come third. I don't know why, but I just don't think
he'll be up there. I would say.
And they're announcing the All-Australian on the same in the same event, the virtual awards night. So the All-Australian, I think the coaches award, although I think that's known, isn't it? So
that's week to week.
The Rising Star, all on the same night.
I don't trust anything that has input from umpires who can't see the blinding obvious in the game. So I don't know how well Track will do regardless.
The umpiring was we've gone past the match, but it was terrible. I mean, I think we had 5 free kicks to nothing in the first quarter, so I'm happy with that. But they missed so many things. There was one, Essendon supporters were crying on Twitter about one of the decisions. The Track got tackled and dropped the ball, and it was there, and it was just play on. And they were crying about that, but they, that unrealistic attempt to mark that wasn't paid. And then since then I've seen two of them paid since then in other games. So I don't know.
We haven't got time, Andy, to get going on the umpires.
No, we don't.
We won't have time for my rant against the commentators.
Well, you can go. Let's go. Yeah, I told you could. Go on. You can have your rant.
Well, I'll do the short version. I just can't stand them anymore. I just can't. I got to get back to a game of footy. And when I watch them on the replay, I can stand them because I've already watched the game and I don't really care after that. But when you've got 5, 6, mainly men or all men in the, all ex-footballer meatheads who are clueless. And the one that did my head in was the Saints-Giants game on the Friday night. And Brian Taylor was asking his fellow stupid commentators about why did the Giants keep kicking to the forward pocket. And, why teams across the league just keep kicking to the forward pocket. And, Kerry said, well, they like to get the stoppage. And thinking, what are you talking about? They do it for a specific reason. It's probably data analytics tell them that, that's the way to go and that they score more often. It's, stoppages is one aspect of it. But the problem is you kick to the top of the square, which was where they were saying that even, Kerry was saying kick it to the top of the square to give Cameron a chance there. Is if you lose the ground ball at that spot, you've got 3 lanes for the players to take it out, and one of which is the corridor, so both wings in the corridor. If you turn it over there, a team like the Bulldogs is going to have a scoring opportunity almost for sure. You turn it over a ground ball, get in the pocket. You've got the boundary line hand you in, like in basketball, George, where the boundary line's your friend. It's you've got one less spot where they can run, so they're much more likely to trap it in there. And then that dump kick out of the defensive zone, goes to your wall. None of which can happen if you lose it in the corridor. So it just drives me nuts. It just can't stand how uninformed and how unhelpful they are, because if they'd explain that to football fans, they'd be less annoyed about why does Gawn kick that ball to the pocket, because that's the percentage play. It's what the coaches are drilling into them because the stats and the data tell them that that's what works. And I just cannot stand it and can't wait to get back to the to live games next year.
The annoying thing is, particularly in that circumstance, I know I was watching a game that was in Brisbane. I think Brisbane might have been playing, and Luke Hodge was commenting on exactly that question to Brian Taylor, and this is weeks and weeks ago, and the answer was the same. You're kicking there because of percentages, and he obviously didn't take that on. But you're right. We've got 5 or 6 of these meatheads from who last played football 20 years ago in some cases, trying to work out what's going on the field or trying to tell people what's going on in the field. And it's only people like Hodge and Daisy Pearce who are actually able to explain exactly what is going on today and why people are doing things. And it's
and she's brilliant. Daisy Pearce is totally brilliant, and actually provides some insight into the game. And the ridiculous thing is, Kerry is not a caller. Taylor's the caller in that circumstance, in that setup, and he was asking the special comments man, Kerry, who, as you say, played 20 years ago when you did kick to the top of the square, and then Kerry 1 out, 2 out, 3 out could take his contested mark. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. Kerry wouldn't take that mark, and a defender would whisk it out of there and up the other end in 20 seconds, and you'd concede a goal. It's just they add nothing to the understanding of the game. And how many people in a box do you need? You only need 2 people to call a game of footy, surely. I told you not to get me started.
Changes. Big Man's got big changes for footy commentary in 2021. The last thing I just want to bring up, because probably won't. I think maybe we'll do a show on our individual players and then after trade week as well. Trade targets. Is there anyone realistic trade targets that you want the D's to go after? George, I'll start with you.
I've got one. I won't get involved in all the let's go and get Jeremy Carriman, let's go and get Hawkins or something like that. You're not going to get those sort of players, short of a miraculous sort of thing and short of a Dangerfield sort of situation where the player wants to go to the club. I think the most realistic one for us at the moment is Myercheck at Collingwood. He's out of contract. Collingwood is struggling to keep their salary under the salary cap, and they're trying to keep Moore and Dacos and I think DeGoey as well. Myercheck's exactly what we need up forward. Just he's similar to Brown, but he's 28. He's at the right age. He's tough and he's hard. He came up through the from Port Melbourne. I think he played that in the VFL. He's one of those players who performs every week and is prepared to really put in. I think he's exactly what we need, and we could make the offer for him.
What would we have to give up?
I'm not sure. He's out of contract, so it'd be an interesting situation. Collingwood are on the back foot with him. What can they offer him is their problem. If we offer him basically more money, he comes across.
Yeah, but I reckon there's a good chance we'll get him, George. I've just got that feeling because.
Has our name been thrown out? Have you seen our name there, or this is just someone that you want?
No, there's no media ever about Collingwood players leaving Collingwood.
Yeah, I reckon for me, Andy, the one absolutely, and I think we'll get him. That's just my normal optimism. So,
So it's not going to happen.
It's Saad. He's the one that we need. He's exactly the footballer we need. If sure he gets to Melbourne and you recognise, I thought he was, an elite kick and never misses a target. Of course he's going to miss his target, like he did in the game against us. But he's exactly what we need. He's relatively quick. He's aggressive in his kicking. He can clear 50 metres. Like he's very similar to Salem, and it was interesting. After the game, there was a footage of them talking to each other, and I'm sure, because I'm an elite lip reader, I'm sure what they were talking about is coming to the D's next year, and how well famously they'll get on each, like yin and yang on the two halfback flanks. But he's as good a kick as Salem, better, I think, because he's more aggressive and he can kick 50, 60 metres, where Salem doesn't seem to want to kick over 30 metres. So I think he's exactly what we need, and I'd be willing to bet they're going to move heaven to earth and earth to get him. And the problem for your recruiting, one of the big problems for our recruiting strategy, and I blame Ruse for this as well as Goodwin, is that if you don't draft in those sorts of players, you have to play overs for the to get them to your club, and if so, well, that's what we have to do. The other one is Williams. He'd be brilliant as well, but he sounds like he's not coming to the D's, and he does sound like he's too expensive. It's 7, 8. They're talking 900,000, $1 million for a quick halfback flanker. He's an excellent player, but probably that's out of our price range for list balance and a whole range of other reasons. But I think Saad is definitely a player we should be targeting. I'm assuming they have targeted him, and I'm actually pretty confident we'll get him.
What about you, Andy?
Well, is Jeremy Cameron really off the table? Can't we just give 7 players for him? Isn't that the Demon Lamb way, where you package up 7 players? And
Hunt, definitely Hunt. He's got a lot of future, Hunt.
I don't know. Saad was definitely I wanted Saad when he was mooted to come out of the Gold Coast. He was one of the guys I wanted, and I'd take Myercheck definitely. I think we just need someone else up with Wiedemann up in the forward line, and you need someone.
I mean, so much depends next year, and it did this year, on what happens with T-Mac. I think, thinking about the season, just about the most significant issue for us was his form, whether it be injury. I'm positive it's injury related. You just got to hope that he gets right again, because we gave up 40-odd goals with Hogan going, 40-odd goals with T-Mac. We haven't come close to replacing them. Jackson will play a role up there, but his role will be a bit different. He's been such a critical player to not have in the team, and for no other reason structurally. Like the sort of forward line was built around him being in that position. So let's just hope he comes good, and he would be like a boon recruit if he does.
Anything else, boys?
I think that's about us.
Season's over.
Season's over.
Season's over. Another one's done and dusted.
Who do you think's going to win the whole thing? George?
I don't know. I really don't know. Geelong, fortunate in that it was only a 17-game season, and their old heads, like the Ablets and the Selwoods, are back after having been rested for a long time, and Taylor's the same.
traditionally they get to the end of the season. This has been the case for the last couple of years where they just fall away so badly because they do have an ageing list there. But I think they might be advantaged this year with the shorter season and having rested those players. Port Adelaide, I'm not sold on Hinkley as a coach, particularly after I watched the Geelong Port Adelaide game, and he just gave Geelong the game by not making the required moves that he had to make. He left a second year player or a first year player playing on Hawkins, and Hawkins had an absolute day out. And that would have been a very obvious change to make, and Hinkley just left him there to be crucified, unfortunately. I think Richmond are the real goers this year. They've got everything going for them. They're playing some really exciting football. They're not getting to the point in games where they're losing them or giving the lower teams a chance. They are indeed ruthless. Brisbane might have the youth and enthusiasm to get themselves through to the finals, but I think Richmond are going to be the ones that are going to make it this year.
Big man.
I've lost all enthusiasm for the sport known as Australian rules football. So my ability to think forward, if I'm thinking through the kick, I can't stand the thought of Richmond winning again. I just can't stand it. I can't stand watching Scott win a grand final. So that's off the target, off the table.
I don't like any of them. I don't want
I
any
don't
of them.
mind Brisbane. I could be happy enough for them, and I wouldn't mind the Doggies. But I actually think Port are a good chance in terms of punting. I think they're $7 at the moment, and I reckon, and I think from memory, the Tigers are 420 or something, 450 favourites, deserved favourites. But I reckon the Port have got the right mixture of players, energy. Their system is good. They've got great sort of spread of players with different attributes. I really like how their spread of in and under players like Wine and what's the bald-headed bloke, Powell Pepper. They've got Dixon up forward. They've got lots of sort of X factor players in their young players. So I think that I'm assuming. Am I right to think that they'll get a home final in the first week in Adelaide?
Yes.
So they'll win that game, and they're with the top. That gives them a big leg up playing at home in front of a crowd. So, I think I'll be putting some money on them to win, and from that point on, I'll just assume that they're going to win. So, I'm saying Port.
Andy,
very good. Very good. I'm leaning towards either Port or the Tigers going to win. I'm hoping it's not Geelong. If my want, I'd probably want. For me, Brisbane's the least offensive from a winning perspective. I don't know any Brisbane supporters, and they're the least offensive in my book. So let them have it, and I like their coach. I like it when he talks to his players on the boundary line. I like it when he gets really angry and has a spray because it seems out of character for him. I don't know. There's just too many teams I don't like that are in there, and I'm pretty dark that we're not there. So,
one thing about the Dogs, I couldn't stand winning. If thinking of that game, that was the other comment I was thinking about the Bulldogs Dockers games, is how many times did they throw the football?
Oh, they do it every
What
week.
is that? And they've added a new one this year, the over-the-head throw. It's like, what is going on? This is ridiculous. Bloody handball it, not throw it. So, I can't. And if Wallace... Sorry, I've just lost it for Wallace. I can't. Dogs better not make it.
Okay.
And all of our biases are coming out because none of us think Collingwood are good enough.
Oh, well, I don't.
And would there be... I mean, it would be terrible, wouldn't it, if there was a COVID sort of problem right before the grand final and they had to call it off and not have a winner at all this year?
That would be a disaster for the AFL, you'd think. Getting through the whole season and
the
then
whole team, the whole Collingwood team breaches everyone else up there.
Could go out with a bang. All right, let's leave it there. We've had a long show. We'll be back. We'll be back. Maybe we'll come back in a couple of weeks. We'll do a rundown of all the players that give a play listing. We'll definitely be back after trade week to discuss who we're brought in after the draft as well. Anyway, go D's 2021.
Go Red Leg.